Today, I am going to be continuing talking about Karma Chagme's Mountain Dharma as taught by Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche. And the chapter that I'm discussing tonight is the cooling shade, placing others under the protection of the three jewels. Here he is talking about how we can help others. And it doesn't matter if the person is alive or if they have died, that we can place them under the protection of the three jewels. And there are a number of different ways to do it. In this chapter, the easiest way is described as using the four practices of Mahamudra ngondro. And the metaphor right off the bat here is the idea of a parasol that shades one from the hot rays of the sun. And having been in Tibet, I can tell you this, that at 12,000 feet, the sun can be quite hot. There isn't as much atmosphere to soak up the rays. And in fact, if you look at either pictures of Tibetans or Tibetans that have spent their life in Tibet at altitudes like that, their skin looks much older than they really are because the ultraviolet rays are so strong. So to continue this idea of an umbrella or a parasol, the parasol would be the compassion of the three jewels, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And on top of this beautiful parasol, there is an ornamental golden peak, which represents these abundant and precious qualities of the three jewels. It continues by saying that this parasol, this metaphorical parasol, has a golden handle, and the handle is devotion. Devotion to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And also the Guru. It is devotion that makes it work. And that really sums up this whole chapter about placing others under the protection of the three jewels. It isn't that the people that you are placing under the protection of the three jewels have to have the devotion, because Rinpoche said you could even place non-Buddhists under the protection. It's that you need to have the devotion, the confidence, the trust in the three jewels that they will give protection. You have to have that for it to work. And the reason why these methods work is because the Buddhas are constantly regarding all sentient beings with compassion and loving kindness. It's unconditional. It's utterly impartial. The metaphor that is frequently used is like a loving mother regards her only child. So these enlightened beings have completely eliminated all obstacles to having unconditional love and unconditional compassion. Buddhas do not have friends and enemies. So to sum up this introduction, this is the best way to protect somebody, is put them under the protection of the three jewels. As I mentioned here, there are a lot of different ways to put others under the protection of the three jewels, but this chapter talks about Mahamudra Ngondro because it's common to be familiar with this practice, and it's not very complicated. And I think most people here that are watching this have done some, if not totally completed the practice. So it's just adding to what you already know rather than trying to learn something from scratch. There are four parts of ngondro, and ngondro, by the way, means that which goes before. And what it goes before is more advanced Vajrayana practices, and especially Mahamudra practice. In the Nyingma tradition, there also is ngondro, and it is before you would then practice Dzogchen, which is very similar to Mahamudra, but slightly different. And I'm not going to go into the difference tonight. So the first part of ngondro is going for refuge and generating bodhicitta, this mind of enlightenment, wanting to travel the path so that you can bring all beings to the conclusion of the path, which is becoming a completely enlightened Buddha. So you would do this practice exactly as you would ordinarily. When you get to the part where you're repeating the refuge vows and then doing prostrations, you just maintain this attitude of devotion. And then after doing the number of repetitions of the refuge prayer, then you take the bodhisattva vow and then continue. And just before the dissolution of the visualization, you recite this line here. Now, this gives you the English translation, and since the Tibetan is not given, I would say it in English. And it is, quote, "We go for refuge to the Guru and the three jewels." Repeat that 108 times, which basically is one mala. Then, after that special one-line prayer, repeated 108 times, you think that the sources of refuge melt into light and dissolve into yourself, which is the normal way of doing it, or the usual way of doing it, but also into those that are being protected. And think that those that you are wanting to be protected, where this visualization dissolving into light then absorbs, that they are receiving the blessings of the three jewels. This is what Karma Chagme describes as relative refuge. Then there is the ultimate or absolute refuge. And what you would do then is just rest in this awareness of the fundamental equity of yourself, those that are being protected, and also the source of refuge, the three jewels. So this is called the ultimate or absolute refuge. And then, while you are resting in this ultimate refuge. This would be the same as resting in emptiness. And again, another way to phrase this in the book was that those that you're trying to protect and the sources of refuge have the same fundamental nature and are inseparable as a result. So that completes the first part, the going for refuge. The next is the meditation on Vajrasattva. And what this practice does is it removes the causes of suffering. So this is another way to give protection to other beings. If you remove the causes of suffering, they are protected from suffering. So here, the usual samsaric response to suffering is to blame others, blame ourselves, try to alleviate it with actions that will just cause more suffering. Needless to say, this is what keeps samsara going, lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. This is the source of our hardships, our problems that we experience. And this is the source of problems that others experience. I'm not going to go into karma in depth here, but very simply, it's a matter of cause and effect. And as long as we continue to create the causes for suffering, we will experience more suffering. So if we're going to protect others from suffering, we have to protect them from the causes of suffering. So these causes need to be purified or eliminated. Again, the most effective way, and to a certain extent, the simplest way, if you have at least done some ngondro practice, is through the Vajrasattva practice found in ngondro. So you will do it exactly the way it is explained for an individual to do it. You visualize Vajrasattva seated above your head. He's made out of light. And think that the Vajrasattva above your head then emanates, and you visualize the beings that you want to protect also, and that the Vajrasattva above your head emanates Vajrasattvas that are above the head of all these beings that you want to protect. And again, they can be alive or they can be deceased. If they are deceased, if they have not taken rebirth already, they will soon. And Rinpoche has said that even if a person has been dead for 100 years, you can benefit them. So don't think that, oh, well, that person died a long time ago, there isn't anything I can do. Because you can, and this is one way to do this. So after this visualization, then you recite the liturgy. You get to a point where you start repeating the Vajrasattva mantra. And as you are doing that, the normal visualization is that in the heart center of Vajrasattva, you have his seed syllable and his mantra, and wisdom starts to accumulate on these syllables. And gradually fills up Vajrasattva's body. His body is hollow. And then it starts dripping out of the toe of his right foot, then into you through the crown of your head. And you visualize this happening with all the beings that you are wanting to protect. And again, visualize this to the best of your ability. And if nothing else, have confidence that this is happening, even if your visualization looks like what you would see in a closet in the middle of the night with no moon. Have confidence that this is what's going on. So as you are doing this, then you come to reciting the 6-syllable mantra, Om Benza Sato Hung. You do that for 108 times, again, keeping up the visualization. And then when you get to the end of the practice, you then have the Vajrasattva above your head melt into the light and dissolve into you. And the same thing happens with all the different beings that you are protecting, that the Vajrasattva above their head melts into light and dissolves into them. Then, as I mentioned, with the refuge, you meditate on emptiness without any thought that you have done confession and purification, without any thought that you're the person doing this, and without any thought of the act of confession having any inherent existence. So the beings that you are visualizing have no inherent existence, you have no inherent existence, and the act has no inherent existence. This is known as the 3 wheels, absence of the 3 wheels. So that is the absolute or ultimate confession, which is just resting in emptiness. And then the relative is the liturgy and repeating the mantra. So that is the second practice. The third now is the mandala offering. And what you're doing with the mandala offering is creating the causes of happiness. With Vajrasattva, we are eliminating the causes of unhappiness. So with the mandala offering, we recognize that it is our merit that we have accumulated that causes happiness, and that without the merit, without the causes of happiness, that we really cannot be happy. So Karma Chagme says the simplest or the least difficult way of accumulating merit is the mandala offering that is in ngondro. And he says, as a result of that, is actually the most profound way of accumulating merit. And since we want to bring others under the protection of the 3 jewels, we want them to be happy. Earlier, we wanted them to be free of suffering. So now what we do is we visualize the sources of refuge in the sky in front of you. We offer the mandala. I'm not going to go into this practice in detail, but when we're offering the mandala, we think that the bodies of myself and all those to be protected, we think about all of their possessions plus your own possessions. and all the virtues accumulated by yourself and by these beings that you want protected in the past, in the present, and in the future, that all of these are brought together in one offering, and it's symbolized by, quote, the world, unquote, which is in the center, Mount Meru, and then the four continents. It's not mentioned in this section, but the sun and the moon are included too in the actual prayer that you repeat. So you think that you've emanated billions and billions of these worlds, and that you're filling them with all kinds of the most wonderful, desirable things that are found in the realms of humans and gods. And you again follow the normal mandala liturgy, but you add this after you finish the mantra that you do when you're offering the mandala. You add, and here it is in Sanskrit, Guru Deva Dakini Ratna Mandala Pratita Soha. And you repeat that 108 times, which is one mala. So this is relative accumulation of merit. Then the visualization, it all dissolves into you and those to be protected. And each of the beings that you are wanting to protect, they get, to quote the book, a full set of all the deities that we're making offerings to. You don't divide up and 10% goes to that, another 10% goes to another being. Everyone gets 100%. There's plenty to go around. These are enlightened beings. So then, as before, you meditate briefly on emptiness, realizing there is this equality between you, the beings that you are seeking protection for, and the three jewels. Now, the fourth practice is Guru Yoga. And this is the practice of devotion, or the cultivation of devotion. You're wanting to increase your devotion. We're not trying to increase the devotion of the beings that we are seeking protection for. That this is to increase our devotion, our confidence, and so forth. So you visualize the root and lineage gurus above your own head and do the practice as taught in ngondro. Then towards the end, there are two different supplications that you can repeat. And it is the first line of the second supplication. It is Lama Rinpoche La Sol Wadep. I supplicate the precious Guru. You repeat that 108 times for the benefit of those that you are seeking protection for. Then you also visualize the root and lineage gurus above your head only. You do not visualize them above the head of the beings that you are seeking protection for. But while you're repeating this mantra 108 times, you think that rays of light come from the bodies of the lineage and the root gurus above your head, and that they enter the heads of all of those who you are seeking protection for, and that these rays of light drive out all the obscurations and wrongdoing of these beings. And it comes out in the form of black tar. It comes out of the bottom of their feet. Then the rays of light fill their bodies and dissolve into them. And then Rinpoche says that their bodies become crystalline, stainless, and luminous. So while you are doing this, in your mind, think that the blessings of the gurus are actually entering these beings. And this is why all of this is happening. It's purifying their negativity that is leaving in the form of black tar, soot, any other name you want to use. Then at the end of the session, the root and lineage gurus dissolve into you as usual. And then Karma Chagme is quoted. I have not seen anywhere an instruction that you dissolve the root and lineage gurus into the others, end quote. So they just dissolve into you. And Rinpoche says this is because you are the person whose devotion is behind this practice. Again, a person that you are seeking protection for using this guru yoga might not even be Buddhist. So you are the one, your devotion, your confidence, your faith is what is causing this to happen. So then at the end of the practice, as I said, you dissolve the lineage and root gurus into yourself. And that completes the guru yoga. And what comes to mind is the story. This is a very traditional Tibetan story. It's about a woman whose husband was a merchant or a trader, and that he would be gone on business trips for very long periods of time to India. And before he would leave on these business trips, his wife would say, "Bring me back a tooth of the Buddha." And of course, he would say yes. And when he came back from the business trips, each time he had forgotten. And finally, the last business trip, she said, "If you come back and do not have a tooth of the Buddha, I'm going to kill myself." And of course, he forgot. So now he's back in Tibet, approaching home, and he realizes, I don't have a tooth of the Buddha. And he happens to find the skull of a dog and pulls out a tooth from the skull. And then he brings it home and he presents it to his wife as being a tooth of the Buddha. And of course, his wife is just totally delighted. She puts it on her personal shrine. She says prayers to it. Her devotion is great. And it's amazing that it starts producing what are called ring cell, which are relics. They're pearl-like relics. And the woman is even more delighted to see this happening. So she tells one of the local lamas about this, and he comes and looks it over, and then he says to her, This is just the tooth of a dog. This isn't a Buddha's tooth. And the lesson of this is it's possible to receive blessings from the tooth of a dog if you have faith and devotion and confidence. So Karma Chagme finishes this chapter, but with this quote, I have actually heard these instructions from my kind root guru, so I do not think that I just made this up and wrote it down. The point here that Rinpoche was making is there is truth to these teachings, and to follow them, this is a very profound way of placing others under the benefit and protection of the three jewels.